On July 14, 1789, angry crowds attacked the Bastille fortress in Paris. This massive stone prison had become a hated symbol of the king's harsh rule over France. For years, ordinary people had endured crushing taxes, forced work, and now they were starving. Meanwhile, King Louis XVI and the wealthy nobles lived in incredible luxury, completely ignoring the suffering of their people. The common folk had finally reached their breaking point. Just days before the attack on the Bastille, representatives from across France had gathered and made a famous promise called the Tennis Court Oath. They swore they would limit the king's power and create a new constitution that would protect everyone's rights. A powerful new idea was spreading across France, that all people deserved basic rights and freedoms. This wasn't just about France anymore. These revolutionary ideas were starting to influence people all across Europe. It was the beginning of a time that would bring both hope and chaos, enlightenment and bloodshed. During the early months of the revolution, people were filled with excitement and optimism about the future. After the Tennis Court Oath, France was now governed by something completely new, the National Assembly. This was a group of elected officials, mostly educated middle-class men who believed in the power of reason and progress. The Assembly faced an enormous challenge. They had to write a completely new constitution for France, while also running the country's daily affairs and dealing with the financial crisis that was getting worse every day. Most of these representatives initially thought they could work with the king in a system where he would still be monarch, but with limited powers. However, King Louis XVI and his supporters were absolutely disgusted by this idea. They had no interest whatsoever in sharing any power with ordinary citizens, whom they looked down upon. The king and his allies were determined to restore his complete authority over France. In June 1791, the king made a decision that would change everything. He secretly tried to escape France with his family, hoping to reach the border where loyal forces could help him regain full control. But his plan failed miserably when he was recognized and captured in the town of Valmy. The royal family was brought back to Paris under heavy guard, treated more like prisoners than royalty. This attempted escape felt like a massive betrayal to the French people. It created a deep split among the revolutionaries. Some still believed they could work with a king in a constitutional monarchy, while others now wanted to get rid of the monarchy entirely and create a republic. By September 1791, the Assembly managed to agree on a new constitution. Under this system, the king would keep some important powers and would work with a new governing body called the Legislative Assembly. But this new government was plagued by constant disagreements and couldn't get much done. The Legislative Assembly was divided into opposing groups. On one side sat the radical Jacobin who wanted dramatic changes to how taxes were collected, how laws were made, and how the church operated. On the other side were the conservative Feuillants who thought the revolution had already gone too far and should stop. With France's government paralyzed by these political fights, both sides began to see war as a possible solution. They thought that fighting a common enemy might unite the country and help them achieve their goals. Interestingly, in 1792, most of Europe wasn't really worried about France and its revolution. Their main concern was what was happening to Poland. The once powerful Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had been getting weaker for decades. In 1772, three neighboring empires, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, had already carved up parts of Polish territory among themselves. Now, in the summer of 1792, Empress Catherine of Russia was worried that Poland might be getting stronger again, so she sent her armies to invade Polish lands. Austria and Prussia watched carefully, determined to grab their own pieces if Russia was going to expand at Poland's expense, while Poland was the main focus. Europe's other monarchs couldn't completely ignore what was happening to King Louis XVI in France. They were concerned about the principles involved and worried that revolutionary ideas might spread to their own countries like a dangerous disease. In 1791, Austria and Prussia had issued a joint statement called the Declaration of Peace. They announced that the treatment of the French king was a concern for all European men. This vague warning was meant to help strengthen King Louis's position, but it had the opposite effect in France. French revolutionaries were outraged by this statement. They saw Austria as a backwards reactionary power that was helping dangerous French exiles. These exiles were mostly aristocrats who had fled France and were now gathering in the German city of Cologne. They were led by the king's own brothers and cousins, and had built up a small army of about 4,000 to 5,000 men, hoping to invade France and undo the revolution. Calls for war began growing louder from all different political groups in France. Among the radical Jacobins, a faction called the Girondins believed that war would bring the country together. Some even talked about launching a crusade to spread revolutionary ideas across all of Europe. Surprisingly, the king and his supporters also wanted war, but for completely different reasons. They thought that fighting would remind French people of their traditional loyalty to the monarchy. Secretly, King Louis and Queen Marie Antoinette actually hoped France would lose the war, because defeat would mean the end of the revolution and a return to the old system. On April 20th, 1792, the French Legislative Assembly voted to declare war on the Austrian Empire. The Assembly cited numerous provocations and insults as justification for this momentous decision. France was swept up in war excitement, and most people expected a quick and easy victory. However, the French army, which had once been one of Europe's most powerful military forces, was now in complete disarray because of the revolution. Nearly half of the army's officers had been aristocrats, and most of them had fled the country to escape the revolution. The officers who stayed behind were not trusted by their soldiers or by the politicians back in Paris. The old royal regiments were also viewed with suspicion by the revolutionary government. To make up for these losses, tens of thousands of enthusiastic volunteers had joined the army. This new citizen army was full of passion and patriotic spirit, but they lacked proper training, discipline, and equipment. They were eager to fight but had no idea how to do it effectively. France's war plan was to capture the Austrian Netherlands, which is modern-day Belgium. This wealthy province seemed like an easy target that would provide both strategic advantage and economic benefits. 3 experienced generals, Rochambeau-Lafayette and Luckner, were put in charge of 3 different armies along the frontier. However, these commanders couldn't agree on a coordinated strategy, which doomed their efforts from the start. The weakness of France's new volunteer soldiers became apparent almost immediately. General Byron led an advance toward Brussels and managed to win a small battle. But he was so alarmed by how poorly his troops behaved during and after the fight that he decided to retreat back to the French border. His soldiers were so nervous and inexperienced that when rumors spread of an Austrian counterattack, they completely panicked and fled in all directions. It was a humiliating rout that showed just how unprepared the French army really was. Another French column, commanded by General Dillon, suffered an even worse fate. Rumors spread among the soldiers that their own officers were betraying them to the enemy. In their fear and confusion, the troops turned on General Dillon himself. They shot and stabbed him with bayonets, then threw his body onto a fire. This tragic incident showed how the revolution had created deep mistrust within the French military. Soldiers suspected their commanders of treachery, while officers couldn't control their men. The early military campaigns of the French Revolution were disasters that revealed just how much the political upheaval had damaged France's ability to defend itself. The revolution that had begun with such hope and enthusiasm was now facing its first real test on the battlefield. The outcome of these early battles would determine not just the fate of revolutionary France, but the future of all Europe. Dreams of a swift French triumph crumbled to dust. The summer brought devastating news as Prussia entered the conflict, standing shoulder to shoulder with Austria in what history would remember as the First Coalition. Their mission was crystal clear: march into France, destroy the revolution completely, and put the king back in his rightful place of power. The Prussian forces marched under the command of the Duke of Brunswick, a man widely recognized as Europe's most skilled military leader. On the 25th day of July, he made a chilling announcement. Should any member of the French royal family suffer harm, he promised to unleash unforgettable revenge upon the citizens of Paris. His words carried a terrifying threat: complete destruction of the city and the execution of every single rebel. Just 6 days after this warning, Brunswick's army crossed the Rhine River and began their march deep into French territory. The capital erupted in fury. Citizens were outraged by Brunswick's threatening words, and the National Guard launched a violent assault on the king's residence at the Tuileries Palace on the 10th of August. Swiss guards and royal servants were brutally killed in the attack. Though the royal family managed to escape death by seeking protection with the Legislative Assembly, they had essentially become prisoners of the radical JAC. The French military was falling apart at the seams. The government couldn't maintain control, and enemy forces were steadily approaching the capital. The revolution faced its darkest hour. The failed attempt to invade the Austrian Netherlands had exposed a harsh reality. France's newly formed citizen army simply was not ready for serious warfare. These volunteer soldiers lacked both proper training and the iron discipline that had made the old royal battalions so effective. Recognizing this crisis, French military leaders began implementing sweeping changes at breakneck speed. They simplified battle formations and tactics to match the limited abilities of their new recruits, who kept pouring in from rural areas across the country. Heavy supply wagons and camping equipment were abandoned to make the army more mobile and agile. Most importantly, experienced veterans from the disbanded Royal Army, who had previously been viewed with deep suspicion, were welcomed back into active service. This newly transformed force would prove far more capable in battle, though it still suffered from a severe shortage of experienced officers. At this critical moment, France could only field 54,000 troops under the leadership of Lafayette and Luft to stand between Brunswick's advancing army and Paris. The combined Austrian and Prussian forces numbered 84,000 men. While this might seem like a relatively modest invasion force, military experts believed it would be more than enough to sweep aside France's inexperienced defenders. The careful and methodical Brunswick moved his army slowly through French territory. On the 23rd of August, his forces successfully captured the border stronghold of Long. 10 days later, they seized the fortress city of Verdun. When news of Verdun's fall reached the capital, it triggered widespread panic among the population. Georges Danton, one of the most prominent Jacobin leaders, delivered a fiery speech to rally the people. "Until now, you have only witnessed pretend warfare," he declared. "We are about to face a much more terrible conflict, a war where the entire nation fights against tyrants. The time has come to tell our people they must throw themselves against their enemies with everything they have. These inflammatory words sparked dangerous rumors about secret plots within Paris itself. Angry mobs decided to take matters into their own hands, storming the city's prisons and brutally murdering everyone they found inside. Catholic priests and nuns who had refused to pledge loyalty to the new revolutionary government also became targets of this violence. The September massacres, as they came to be known, claimed the lives of more than 1,000 people. The situation at the front lines was equally chaotic. General Rochambeau had resigned in complete disgrace. Lafayette had committed the ultimate betrayal by defecting to the Austrian side after his disastrous attempt to stage his own military coup against the revolutionary government. The new military commanders were Generals Kellerman and Dumouriez, both passionate supporters of the revolution, but neither had been tested in major combat leadership roles. Dumouriez, known for his energy and bold decision-making, received orders to stop the coalition's advance at the Argonne Forest. However, believing the enemy would march southward, he failed to properly defend the mountain passes, allowing Brunswick to outmaneuver his forces from the north. In a humiliating defeat, Chazot's entire division was scattered by just 1,500 Prussian cavalry soldiers. The panic that followed this rout nearly caused the complete collapse of the entire French army. Dumouriez barely managed to keep his remaining forces from falling apart completely. With this victory, Brunswick had opened a clear path to Paris, but just when things looked hopeless, Kellerman's reinforcements finally arrived to support Dumouriez. His army of the center included some of the finest regiments in the entire French military, giving Dumouriez the confidence he needed to take the fight directly to the enemy. Instead of simply blocking the road to Paris, as expected, Dumouriez made an incredibly bold strategic decision. He marched his army against the rear of the coalition forces, directly threatening their supply lines and communication routes. Unwilling to risk continuing his advance with this threat behind him, Brunswick turned his army around to face the French forces head. This, he believed, presented a golden opportunity to completely destroy the revolutionary army, which had never before managed to hold its ground in a major battle. In the early morning hours of September 20th, thick fog covered the rolling hills surrounding the village of Valmy. Brunswick's advanced units, marching eastward, unexpectedly encountered General Valence's troops defending the village of La Lune. Valence commanded veterans from the old Royal Army, and these experienced soldiers put up fierce resistance. Their determined fighting bought precious time for the rest of the French army to take defensive positions on a ridge just west of Valmy village. Brunswick had not anticipated such stubborn resistance from the French forces. He decided to wait until more of his troops arrived before launching a full-scale assault. The two armies were now almost perfectly matched in size, approximately 36,000 French soldiers facing 34,000 Prussian. Both sides brought their artillery into position. 40 French cannons against 56 Prussian guns. Although the Prussians had more artillery pieces, the French guns held better positions on the high ground. The French artillery corps had also been less disrupted by the revolution than other military branches. These gunners were experienced, well-disciplined, and equipped with superior weapons thanks to the famous Grib-Oval system, which had modernized and standardized French artillery equipment. As both armies opened fire with a thunderous barrage, Dumouriez and Kellerman rode back and forth along their battle lines. They deliberately exposed themselves to flying cannonballs, encouraging their men to stand firm under the intense bombardment. French troops demonstrated their determination by loudly singing a new revolutionary anthem that had become wildly popular that summer, La Marseillaise. As the artillery battle continued for hours, it became increasingly clear that the French forces would not break easily under pressure. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Brunswick ordered a general infantry advance. The Prussian foot soldiers immediately came under devastating fire from French cannons. With each step forward, more and more men were cut down by deadly cannonballs. After advancing only a few hundred yards, Brunswick realized that continuing the attack would cost too many lives and ordered his forces to halt. For the first time since the war had begun, the French army had successfully thrown back an enemy attack. But the battle wasn't over yet. A Prussian cannonball struck a French ammunition wagon, causing a massive explosion. Soldiers were knocked to the ground by the blast, and the artillery duel stopped briefly as men on both sides stared in amazement at the enormous explosion. A Prussian officer urged Brunswick to take advantage of this moment of confusion and press the attack, but the Duke hesitated, uncertain whether to continue. Meanwhile, a young French officer, who would later become King Louis Philippe, rode up with 2 batteries of horse artillery to strengthen the French defensive line. Kellerman was also on the scene, raising his hat high and shouting "Long live the nation" to rally his troops. In previous battles, French forces had fled at the first sign of serious danger. At Valmy, something different happened. They held their ground. From the experienced Royal Army veterans to the raw civilian volunteers, from the exhausted artillery crews to the brave commanding generals, everyone stood firm. At 5 o'clock in the evening, with the rain beginning to fall and ammunition running dangerously low, the firing gradually died out on both sides. Valmy had not been a large or particularly costly battle in terms of casualties. Both armies suffered only a few hundred losses each. Some military historians even debate whether it should be considered a real battle at all. but it represented a crucial turning point for the French Revolution. At the moment when the revolution's very survival hung in the balance, the Revolutionary Army, strengthened by experienced soldiers from the old royal forces, had successfully held its position and stopped the enemy invasion. The day after this victory, emboldened by news of their army's success, France's new National Convention took a historic step. They officially abolished the monarchy and proclaimed France a republic. The French army then withdrew to stronger defensive positions further back. The Prussian forces were left to fend for themselves in hostile territory, far from their supply bases. Heavy rains continued to batter both armies throughout September, while desertion and disease reduced Brunswick's main force to just 17,000 effective soldiers. The Prussian commander had seen enough. He had no choice but to begin his retreat from French soil. Brunswick's trained troops were too valuable to waste on a mission that couldn't succeed. Besides, there were bigger problems brewing in Eastern Europe. Poland was facing another division, and that needed attention. So Brunswick made the call to pull back. On October 23rd, the final coalition forces crossed back over the Rhine River into Germany. It would be over 20 years before another coalition army would get that close to Paris again. More than 3 million people would lose their lives before that happened. That's how significant Brunswick's advance was in the fall of 1792. Want to see brand new, epic history videos before anyone else? Want to watch them weeks before they go live on YouTube? We've got something special for you. There is a new episode in our Rise of China series that covers China's brutal war with Japan. This conflict killed millions and saw terrible war crimes. Even though China was one of the 5 major Allied powers, people in the West still don't know much about their role in World War II. You can watch this video right now on Nebula. That's where all our newest content goes first. Nebula is a streaming platform made by creators like us. This means you'll only find top quality videos there. Real people make these videos with care and passion about topics that matter, and there are no ads to interrupt your viewing. We really think you should check out Real Life Law's Modern Conflicts series. Their recent episodes break down what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine with expert analysis. They release a new episode every month, so you'll stay current with world events. Plus, you'll learn about interesting conflicts from history. Their newest release tells the amazing story of drug lord Elch. They use great footage and stunning visuals to bring the story to life. This episode is a Nebula original, which means you can't watch it anywhere else. More and more videos in this series are becoming exclusive to Nebula. Nebula has hundreds of other great creators covering every topic you can think of. Whether you want original movies and shows, documentaries about travel, gaming, technology, or history, you'll find something you love. There's also a growing collection of Nebula originals that only subscribers can watch. We have a special deal just for Epic History viewers. Click the link in our description to get 40% off Nebula's yearly plan. That's only $36 for the whole year, which breaks down to just $3 per month. If you want an even better deal, the lifetime plan gives you access forever for $300 with no hidden fees. Here's something cool. All Nebula subscribers now get a monthly guest pass. You can share this with a friend and they get full access to Nebula for an entire week. This means you can share your favorite videos with the people you care about. We want to thank everyone who already subscribes to Nebula. For those who haven't joined yet, we hope to see you there soon. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Special thanks to our builders like Jonathan Williams, Craze Lizard, and Kevin Tron. Thanks to our citizens like Matthew, Leo, Ulysses U, and Eric Davidson. And thanks to our heroes like Yuko Sin. You can join them by supporting us on Patreon. Supporters get early access to new videos without ads. You'll also get exclusive updates and get to vote on what topics we cover next.